Hello, I'm Bill O'Donnell, and welcome to another program on spirituality. Today in the studio, I am indeed thrilled to have back my old friend, Father Paul Meaden, former prior at the Benedictine Monastery in Pecos, where we have just completed a very successful men's retreat sponsored by the Knights of Columbus here in Santa Fe, and it's a great opportunity to welcome you back, Father Paul. Welcome.
Thank you, Bill.
This is great. Now, for those longtime viewers of Spirituality TV, and now the Year of the Priest, Father Paul was here back in 2008, and it was fabulous. We had a great story to tell, and Father Paul has a great background, and I don't know if we got him ordained in that story because there's so much to talk about prior to that, but today we're going to pick up with it, and glad to have you back, Father Paul.
Glad to be back.
Okay. For those who don't know Father Paul, he was at the Benedictine Monastery in Pecos for, I don't know,
30 years.
30 years. Until recently, he's been traveling and working hither and yon, but he came back specifically to help with a men's retreat and be the retreat master at the Benedictine Monastery over Divine Mercy Weekend in 2011. And we're in the afterglow of that event, where every man who came received 3 sacraments and a plenary indulgence. Now, I can tell you from my own experience, when you've had 3 sacraments and a plenary indulgence, you've had your whole persona cleaned and cleansed, and I'm still high from that event. So thanks for your part in Father Paul.
Well, you're certainly welcome, but I'm thankful for the Spirit's presence with us, with all of us.
That's true.
Myself and all the participants.
That's right.
We had a good time. It was good.
It was good. And I also want to hasten to add that we want to thank Father Vincent Dominguez, who is the state chaplain for the Knights of Columbus, and coincidentally, the pastor at St. Anthony's in Pecos, who was right down the road and came and gave us a brief talk and helped with the Sacrament of Reconciliation, and our own Father John Tremblay, currently at the Cathedral, St. Francis Cathedral Basilica in Santa Fe, filling in ably for Monsignor Jerome Martinez-Lira, the rector, who is currently in Rome on sabbatical, and was there for the sacraments of reconciliation and came back to help with the Sacrament of the Anointing. So I can tell you from my experience, just trust me, if you've had the Sacrament of Reconciliation, the Eucharist 2 or 3 times during that period of time, and the Sacrament of the Anointing, and a plenary indulgence because it was Divine Mercy Sunday, thanks to our recently beatified Pope John Paul II.
Right.
It was just beatified May 1st, 2011, and he established this feast on behalf of Sister Faustina. God came through her and told her to talk about the divine mercy of Jesus Christ, and they provided this plenary indulgence for anyone who goes to confession and communion within 3 weeks before Divine Mercy Sunday or 3 weeks after. It's an automatic plenary indulgence, and what that does is like being rebaptized. You're completely cleansed of any and all, if there's any temporal punishment due to sin, it's gone.
We need all the help we can get.
Well, I'll tell you, and I love the feeling there's no room in hell for me right now. I like that feeling, whatever that is. So, forgive the long introduction. Father Paul, it was great to have you. The men's retreat was close to my heart. He did one at the monastery about 2 or 3 years ago, and I remembered it and invited him back to do it again for a new group of men, and they seemed to thoroughly enjoy it.
Thank you, Bill. Glad to participate. Glad I could help.
Okay. Give those who didn't see the previous show a thumbnail sketch of your background and how you got to be a monk and a priest.
Well, it might be a little lengthy, but I'm going to make it as brief as I can.
Okay.
I never anticipated I would end up in the religious life. I can say that right off the top. And so what did happen is that, born and raised in the Great Plains, Midwest, and when I was a child, I looked in every direction, north, south, east, and west. And I said to myself, all there is all around me are rolling hills. Rolling hills all the way, rolling hills all the way to the Appalachia. And then if you go to the Gulf, south, through, Iowa and Missouri and Kansas and Arkansas, Oklahoma, and rolling hills, all the way to the Gulf. And then if you look to the west, rolling hills, but then there's mountains, you see. And on a cloudy night, I could get KOA Denver on my little old radio when I was a kid. And they would give the weather reports for the mountains. And all I could dream was mountains because I'm stuck. Everywhere I look, it's rolling hills everywhere. It's north, south, east, and west. But when I heard this report, the weather report about the mountains, I think, mountains? I'll never get to see a mountain. So when the opportunity came, and I liked geography, I was good at that, and I said, but I can't make a living too much in that. I can't see that unless I go into geopolitics or political science. But I thought, I think geology would be interesting. I applied and was accepted at the Colorado School of Mines, and so I went out there and received an engineering degree with a lot of effort.
That's Golden, Colorado, right near Denver.
That's right, Coors.
Yeah, the Coors Brewery, yeah.
And but at any rate, that's where I went. Struggled through, and I don't know if I had an engineering aptitude or not, but they made me have one. I got one eventually, and so I finished there. And then in my day,
and that's in the 50s, right?
Yeah, the 50s. Yeah. And in my day, the draft was still on, so you had to fulfill your commitments. So I ended up with the ROTC and went into the Corps of Engineers. And so I was there for 2 years, and then I went into industry, and worked with various contractors and consulting engineers on really interesting projects. I was glad that somehow, and I wasn't aware of it, but the Lord kind of called me into those areas. The background hasn't hurt me a bit.
Yeah. They're worth mentioning. Tell us just those 2 big projects that you worked on that were pretty extraordinary.
Well, I was involved in 2 $100 million projects, at least back in the 60s and 70s. It costs a lot more today, but the underwater tube between San Francisco and Oakland, I was one of the two guys. We were responsible for digging the trench across San Francisco Bay, and I had a good soils background, so that worked out well. And
how deep was that again?
130 feet underneath the Bay Bridge.
Yeah.
And then 30 feet on the Oakland side and 90 feet underneath the ferry building. Those of you who have been to San Francisco, you would know the ferry building at the end of Market Street.
But you'll know the tubes as the Bay Area Rapid Transit System, or BART, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, it's a great system, and I was glad to be part of that.
But before that, you were on the Alaska Pipeline.
Oh no, that followed after.
That was after? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, in the 1960s, for any number of years on the Transbay Tube.
Okay.
And I got pretty excited because I was interested. I worked on 4 highway projects, and frankly, highway construction kind of bored me. I said, I want something that's interesting, that's challenging, and so they assigned me to the underwater work. And I was under Outfalls down in Los Angeles, and Outfalls that's a nice name for a sewer, but you have to put this, it's treated now today. They do a good job. Environmentally, they do good work.
Well, I encourage everybody at home to go to spiritualitytv.org when it comes up at some point, and you'll be able to see the first lengthy interview that we did at that time, which tells all those stories and a few more, but I think we shorted them last time. We didn't get you ordained, so I'm going to speed it up by saying you went through a personal transformation within yourself, depression that led you by default to the Benedictine Monastery in Pecos to start this other career.
Right, and that happened when I was working on the Alaska Pipeline, and I was it's an anglicized word. Up there they say Valdez. Well, it's but it's Valdez, really.
I know. I grew up in a town we called Vallejo, and I found out when I moved to New Mexico it's actually Vallejo. Go ahead.
But I went into depression. I didn't even know what depression was. All I do know is that to me it was the loss of hope, the loss of all meaning. You get drained of that, and you're tossed out into the ocean of meaninglessness, and that was tough because I couldn't identify it. So all I could say to myself was, I'll do anything to get out of this state I'm in. And of course, I wasn't aware of it at the time, but the Lord was kind of stroking his chin, and he said, "Anything?"
Yeah.
And
now you had been raised Catholic, but were you still practicing at this time?
Yeah, I was.
Okay.
I was. I had a conversion experience in 1972, and that's, of course, another item.
Sure.
That's another discussion. Conversion is important, I think, for all people in the world, and conversion can take many forms. So.
But you went through a period of anger at the church, and that's sort of like a lot of people.
Oh yeah, I bailed out of the church for about 5 years in the 1960s. because I got a good dose of church history from, not from the Catholics, but from my Protestant friends. And when I found out that they were right, oh my, you could have fried eggs on my feet. I was so mad at the church. But the Spirit of God is very patient, and so He lets us have our temper tantrums. I kind of visualized it in my own life, like the Lord putting His hand right on the top of my head, and you know how kids are, you know, they flail their arms around and when they have their temper tantrums. Well, I was having one of those spiritual ones.
And you were how old at that time, in your 30s or 40s?
I was, let's see, I was in my 30s.
Okay.
And so at any rate, after flailing my arms around for a while, he said, "Are you done yet?" And so I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Good." And he says, "I got a mission for you." And of course, I'm doing this in my imagination.
Sure.
But at any rate, I said to him, "I'll do anything to get out of this feeling of meaninglessness." And so what I experienced is I heard groups talking. You know, when you get into the conversion experience, oftentimes, back in those days, it was the charismatic movement. And I heard any number of people talking about this monastery in New Mexico. And this monastery could have been Franciscan, Jesuit, didn't matter to me. Because three things that really appealed to me. The fact that it had an active ministry, because I could never see myself as walking around a cloister with a semi-dotted halo around my head, and with my hands folded. And I don't think so. Too active in my life, I think. So at any rate, I said to myself, Pecos appealed to me because it was an active ministry. It had both men and women, and it was charismatic. Those three
very unique in the church, isn't it?
It was, you know, in those days. It would be unique today. So I wrote to Abbot David, and I said, he won't accept me because I'm too old. I'm already this. I wrote the letter when I was in my early 40s, and so at any rate, he wrote back, and he said, "Come on ahead." I said, "Wait a minute. This really fouls things up. I don't have that on my scope right now, and I'm not picking up the vibes." And so at any rate, he wrote back, and finally, you know, I was still in depression. I said, "Well, I might as well do it because I can't get any worse than it is right now." So I went ahead and entered the monastery. I think it was in September. It was September the 8th, 1977. I drove from California in the Bay Area where I had my condo, and then I entered the monastery on that date, September the 8th,
As a candidate?
As a candidate.
But you've been here for retreat before?
Just once.
Okay.
Just once
Good.
before. And my first and only time there, I was at a retreat that was headed by Howard Irwin, head of the theology department of Oral Roberts.
No kidding.
And I was impressed because Howard, you see, was a dyed-in-the-wool Baptist who was born and raised to hate Catholics. And so at any rate, he went through all his conversion experience, you know, and the experiences that he had in his life's journey. And here he was, head of the theology department at Oral Roberts. But
and they were Pentecostal.
They were Pentecostal.
Yeah, so we're charismatics and Pentecostals are.
They're pretty close.
Pretty close.
Pretty close.
From Protestant to Catholic is probably as close as. Yeah. Okay.
As a matter of fact, today, the Pentecostals.
Okay. Haven't thought about that before, but yeah.
It's a whole other subject, but anyway, it's exciting. Well,
Okay.
at any rate, when I got to the monastery and I went through the formation process, I wasn't. I went through the novitiate, and the first day after the novitiate, they sent me off to seminary at Camarillo, California, Diocese of Los Angeles Seminary.
As part of your novitiate?
No.
After,
right
after
novitiate.
Novitiate was a year, 9 months to a year?
You couldn't shorten that.
Right, yeah.
But that was a
That meant you had
full
to
year.
be, yeah.
And after almost to the day, that wasn't quite true, but within just a few days, they sent me off to Camarillo.
Which is in Los Angeles area, Los Angeles Archdiocese.
Right,
yeah.
near Ventura,
Yeah. Okay.
in Thousand Oaks, those of you who are familiar with the area of Los Angeles. So that's I was there for Well, actually, 3.5, 4 years. 4 years. I had to go through philosophy and all that because I had none when I, you know, in engineering you don't get that. You see.
But quite a few famous priests then became, you know, bishops and cardinals have come out of there.
Well, out of that seminary because it was opened in 1940, so it had about to date it has about a 70-year history. But out of the 70 years, they've had about 50 bishops and 5 cardinals, including William Bill Levada, who took Ratzinger, Cardinal Ratzinger's place.
The highest-ranking American in the Vatican.
In the Vatican, right.
Number 3 man or something.
Yeah, and I had the good fortune of walking up the hill with Bill Levada after he was first appointed auxiliary bishop in Los Angeles, and how we got tied together and walking up to lunch, I will not know to this day. But he, what I got from him is that he had a very good spirit, very humble and holy, I guess, would be a way to describe it.
And he has a good sense of humor. He was here just last year for some reason and asked to say Mass. And of course, you can't have somebody like that come and do it without making a big deal. And the Archbishop was there, and I helped the TV reporters trying to get an interview with him, but his reporter didn't show up, and he's out the side. I said, "Here, I'll put you right here outside the sacristy. You'll catch him when they come out." So I went to the Archbishop and Michael Sheehan. He says, "Can you say a few words for the camera?" And he brings him around, and the poor cameraman had no background. And he says, "Well, how was it, Cardinal?" And he says, "Well, it was licit." You know, and everybody around him laughed. I practically fell down, and that's a kind of an inside joke but for the Catholics, they'll understand. And these guys were off to the races. These guys both had good sense of humor. I want to point that out. And my sister and I met. He was then Archbishop of San Francisco. We went to the 100th year thing of St. Joseph Seminary, and he was there and welcomed us and that sort of thing. But anyhow, so there you are. You've had a lot of auspicious connections, and one of your classmates was just made Archbishop
of San Antonio.
Right.
Yeah, and he was, and if I were any members of the class that I would say would reach up into the upper hierarchy of the church, he was one of them. Yeah. I would put his name down. Gustavo Garcia Siller.
Let me just stop for a second, because most of us have never been to seminary. How did seminary change you? How did it help you grow in your spirituality by going through this process, preparing for priesthood?
Oh, good question. I think. How could I answer that? I don't know, because, you know, when you grow spiritually, like prayer life will grow imperceptibly, so will our spiritual life. We do the normal things of life. We empty the garbage, clean the toilets, make the beds, sweep the floors, do the ordinary thing that people do out in the world, or should do anyway. And and in all this whole process, you grow in ways that you're not even aware, in the spirit and in the soul and psychologically also. So growth takes place, but you're not even aware of it. But what happens is that I think, especially when you get, as one of the doctors points out that we had at the Abbey, he says after the age of 30, we gain in wisdom at the rate of, and how he came up with this, that's a whole nother subject, but 1.5% per year of wisdom. I said, what? Well, what he's probably talking about, and those of us who are familiar with the Myers-Briggs type indicator, is that we grow intuitive. We become more intuitive the older we get.
Right.
And that's where wisdom comes into play.
And I've heard Richard Rohr say that we also only learn from our mistakes after about the age of 30.
Oh, that's it. Yeah. That's true.
So that's something for encouraging you out there, that you're kind of fed up with your mistakes. Trust me, you're learning so much from them, and you got to forgive yourself and then move on. Have compassion for yourself and then move on, because God is working in your life, whether you know it or not, and the dark forces are screwing with you all the time.
Well, you know, when I was working in industry, one of the big contractor that I worked with was Peter Kiewit. They're one of the larger ones in the country today, and of course their credo is don't become known. Be low key, stay under the radar. That's what they do. And they're a multi-billion-dollar corporation today. But at any rate, they had what they call training and development programs that they would send out quarterly to all the employees of the corporation. One of them had to do with failing forward.
Failing forward.
Failing forward.
Yeah.
And we do that in the spirit. In the spiritual life, we not only do it in industry, which is something that we pick up on. We should. We fail forward. Right. And some of the corporations, when you're, if you're a young person, you're applying for a job, they would ask you questions like, how do you handle failure? Good question. Because somebody who was just out of college and so forth, that might make them stop and think,
yeah.
Gee, I haven't really failed yet, but you will.
Yeah, but in your case, you were a heck of a success in your private life, and then you went on, but emotionally you got into depression, you didn't even know what it was, but then you headed for the monastery, and then you became a priest. And I asked you about that experience within there, but now you're at this point, because I know I just received it from you. I mean, Saturday, when you gave me the sacrament of the anointing, boy, I could feel it. You put your hand on my forehead, you prayed over me, and I was almost going down then, but I was supposed to be a catcher for people that were going down, so I had to hold myself up, literally, for the next few minutes to pull it together. But how does the Spirit go through you? Now, as a priest, when you lay your hands on that bread and wine, it's no longer just bread and wine. It is consecrated, and through transubstantiation becomes the body and blood of Christ. And when you hear my confession and you forgive me my sins, absolution's coming through you into me, and I come out feeling like I've just had a spiritual shower. So grace is emanating through you. God is using you. And I remember when you told us about your ordination, I was there for your ordination to the transitional diaconate, and the Archbishop laid his hands on you. You had received holy orders. You were changed forever. So something happens to you guys that you can't hardly explain. What is it?
And because the fact that we can explain it is probably a pretty good idea. Of course, it all filters out into grace. Grace is all around us, and we're not aware of it. And as I said, we grow spiritually imperceptibly. So it is even in our ministry. And those of us who are priests, at least I can speak for myself. I don't even begin to appreciate what's happening up there, even when I'm celebrating Mass. If I knew it, I probably couldn't celebrate Mass, because I would be so awestruck, I couldn't function. So I'm glad the Lord, what He does is He makes you have both feet on the ground when you're going through all of this. And yes, you do get experiences where you just stop and think, but you can't do that when you're up in front of 1,000 people, parishioners. Yeah. But you do it, and you depend on the Holy Spirit to work through you. We have to. That's because true. We can't do anything ourselves. Yeah. We can't produce any of these spiritual experiences by gritting our teeth or trying to force it into a mold in our own perception. Yeah. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, but you, in my first interview with you back in 1991, after Abbot David retired, and you talked about the metanoia, the change of heart, and I've known you that long, so I've watched this happen. So I met you in '83 when you got ordained to the transitional diaconate. Now here's 2011. But when you were with these men over this weekend, let's take it right to that retreat, and all of a sudden you've got, a couple dozen men there, most of whom had never been on retreat, hadn't been to a monastery before, and you somehow brought us all together and took them to another level within themselves. Can you talk about that?
Well, briefly, I can. This did occur to me. When I was in seminary, we read one book called The Sacred and the Profane by Marcia Iliadi. And basically, and he's not the only one, because Karl Rahner has written about it, any number, and it comes out, Pope Benedict the 16th has written about it, and certainly John the 23rd, because he said, we're having Vatican II to try to bring heaven and earth together. So what does that mean? That means that when we're living our life, whether we're religious, whether we're priests, or whether we're working out in the world, whether we're business people, doesn't matter. Because we all have one foot in the profane, or the world of the five senses. We have one foot there, and the other foot we have in the spiritual world. Hopefully that's the case. And of course we live in the world, the profane world, the world all around us, the world of the five senses, so that's what we're really familiar with. But we have one foot there, and then we have one foot in the sacred world, and we depend on the sacred world to carry us through and help us out in the world of the profane. Yeah. So what we have to realize is that the Lord of theology is the Lord of physics too. Now, I often quote Albert Einstein, because he had both feet. Here he was, one of the prominent you talk about in the profane world, in the physics, you think about Einstein right off the top, or Werner Heisenberg and Edward Schrödinger and Niels Bohr, and the whole list goes on of those physicists. But it's interesting that all those early physicists, most all of them had some spiritual orientation, and they would say, I don't know if this goes beyond physics. This goes beyond what I can dream up and conjure up, as the Lord had gifted me with the genius of the creation that he had evolved and that he created. And so Einstein's comments would be such as, we have to content ourselves with the recognition of a miracle beyond which there is no legitimate way out. Or he made such statements as far as the laws of mathematics refer to reality, they are not certain, and as far as they are certain, they do not refer to reality. That's Einstein. And he goes on and on. You know, I can, because I memorize these quotes because people expect me to give theological explanations of the world, the world that we're immersed in. And I said, no, I'll go into these other areas and quote other people to tie them into the Spirit. I do that with, well, I haven't memorized any Rupert Sheldrake. He's a biophysicist, I think. But even in the business world, Peter Vail in his book, Managing as a Performing Art, I think I mentioned that book to the Knights this past weekend. Mm-hmm. But in the last 2 chapters of that book, and I glanced at it just the other day after yesterday I think it was, and sure enough, those last 2 chapters, he describes the Spirit, but he describes it kind of in a secular way, but it's very close. You see, here's that bridge again between the Spirit and the profane, the sacred and the profane.
Yeah, we've only got 2 minutes left, so.
Well, at any rate, that's basically the idea of trying to integrate the sacred and the profane.
Well, the monastery,
I didn't get to my ordination with John Paul II.
That's right. He was ordained by John Paul II. The third show is coming. But one last word about the men who give you feedback from your experience, their experience of coming and receiving those sacraments, going into the sacred space, leaving the world as we know it, going on retreat. Say just a word about the benefit of retreat. We got a minute.
Well, the benefit of the retreat is that hopefully it evangelizes us, and not only those who attend, but also people like myself who are supposedly we're trying to give them something that's useful so they can carry it back forth into the world, into their families with their wives and their associates and so forth. In other words, to bring meaning to their existence. And I told the story about Lowell Thomas.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of vision and hope and climbing the mountains and seeing hope beyond the next ridge, and wondering what's on the other side. The whole idea of wonder. We don't want to lose that sense of mystery, that sense of wonder. That's got to be, should be very much part of our being, no matter where we are, no matter what we're doing. Yeah. That wonderful sense of wonder. Let's not lose it.
That's true. And that's the best advice I could say. We've only got 30 seconds. Thank you so much, Father Paul. We needed more. You have to come back for show number 3 to keep going, because it was quite an experience. So if there's things that Father Paul has said to you, I hope they've encouraged you in your life. Please watch the credits, the address, and the website, the phone number for the monastery will be there. You can contact him through the monastery and other retreats that you might want to go on. But thanks for viewing. And thanks to everyone here behind the scenes, our director, Marshall, all the people behind the cameras, Richard and Dottie, and all the assistants back there, Joe and Alana and Wendy, our floor director. And thank you for viewing. And we really appreciate your support and help. Let us know if it's been of value to your life. So I'm Bill O'Donnell. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned at this time next week for another program on spirituality.